Hi, I'm Melissa Withers, Managing Partner of RevUp Capital. As revenue-based investors, we spend a lot of time working with our companies on their underlying economic models. What goes in, what comes out, and what are all the assumptions that drive that model both today and into the future. And from that perspective, we've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and certainly some mistakes that if you can avoid them, you definitely should. So today I want to share 3 revenue model mistakes that you can't afford to make if you want your company to thrive. Number 1, bad unit economics. And by bad, I mean poorly calculated unit economics. When we start our companies, we really don't know what it's going to cost to deliver our product or service at scale. And then often in the very beginning, we're not fully loading into the cost of operating the business, the true costs that will be required when we're operating down the line or at greater scale. So for example, you're probably not paying yourself for many of the jobs that you're doing, and you might not be paying your team full market rate, or you may not be leveraging or utilizing all of the partners or tools that you will need to deliver your product and service at greater scale. This is totally normal. Herein lies the rub. Most founders wait too long to begin to externalize those costs, even if you're not spending them in the moment, but building them into your model. And the problem is that burying these costs builds like a snowball behind you. You don't even see it coming. And by the time it comes and hits you, it can be really devastating. This is certainly important if you're thinking about your overall capitalization strategy and if you're thinking about revenue-based funding, where it is those details that will impact how comfortable or uncomfortable a revenue-based investment might be down the line. So don't do that. Number 2, assuming that customer acquisition costs will decrease rapidly over time. This is a myth from the past that just won't die. And it really comes from where startup V2 came from in Silicon Valley with software companies and digital marketing. And there was a time when you would get on a platform like Facebook and you would lock into your model, you'd get the algorithm right, and then that model would produce better outputs at lower cost over time. I think that I have to break the news to you. That hasn't been true for a really long time. And not just because if you're doing digital marketing, also because as you go deeper into the market and you start to spread into adjacencies, you may need to reinvest in experimentation. Exactly what you did on one platform for one group of customers, not only is the half-life of that model much shorter than it used to be, when you want to apply that model to customers that are adjacent to that, often the costs tick up for a little while, long before they go down. And then there are all other kinds of things that you need to figure out in terms of how your customers change over time and how you'll need to be investing into that. So while there is a time in the future when customer acquisition costs go down after you've really refined your market-facing strategy, that point in time is a lot further out than most companies project. And so I think counting on that decrease to come too soon is just a huge and tragic and mostly unavoidable error. And similarly, number 3 is expecting your margins on your product or service to radically decrease over time. Again, this comes from physical product experience where if you make 100 of something, it's going to cost you a lot more than when you make 1,000. But where this often goes astray is a failure to recognize that there may be other costs that change that make your COGS stay more flat than you wanted. Also, when you're building into the cost of goods or into your margins, let's say you're a software company, you may be underestimating the amount of customer success that you're going to need to layer in to keep selling at the same rate to the same customers. And so over time, your margins just don't drop as fast as most of the models would have you believe. And a lot of this just comes from things we've inherited, stories we've been told over the last decade. But I can tell you, having now invested in over 130 companies, margins just don't change as quickly as we want. So while we can hold out hope and get excited for a future part in our business when the cost of acquisition and margins will drop, you need to be prepared and have a plan B in case that takes a little longer than you think. I'd rather have you plan for it and be pleasantly surprised when you have a little more money left over than you thought than go in the other direction and find yourself not having what you need to grow. So that's it. 3 revenue mistakes you can't afford to make. Really bad unit economics or poorly calculated unit economics, expecting your cost of acquisition to drop really rapidly over time, and similarly expecting that your margins inside the business are going to rapidly improve over time, where in fact they'll likely stay flat for longer than you think. So that's it. I hope that helps. I'm Melissa Withers, Managing Partner of RevUp Capital. Good luck and keep selling.